I'd like to call this special Board of Aldermen meeting to order February 6th, 9 a.m. We're going over the budget today with budget presentations. And I'd love for everyone to stand if Alderman Reverend Lowe Davis would do our invocation for us, followed by the pledge.
Let us pray. Gracious and merciful Lord, we thank you and praise you for the blessings you bestow upon Southport. Today, let your wisdom and your mercy guide us today as we make decisions for the betterment of all. Amen. To the flag of the United States.
Start out with our ethics statement. If any members know of any conflict of interest or the appearance of a conflict of interest concerning matters on the agenda, please so state at this time. All right, and I will love to have a motion to approve the agenda. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, here we go. I will pass it over to our city manager for our presentation of our proposed budget.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Kelly. City Manager's proposed general fund budget for FY 2026. First, I wish to thank Mr. Flint, the Finance Director, for his good work on this, hard work on the budget, along with the staff's dedication for entering this in the spirit of dedication to help us hold down expenses this year in a difficult budget year, but keeping in mind you're maintaining your excellent high service levels. So thank you for all your cooperation. Okay, so today we discuss the general fund, which is the fund out of which our core city services are provided. Now, the city of Southport is in a strong financial position with a positive, unreserved general fund balance totaling $3.6 million. This is after a reserve of 55% of 1 year's expenses, so the total general fund balance is at $11 million. The general fund is the essence of our city services. I want to first commend our staff. Public Works is out right now fixing stormwater, roads, sidewalks, buildings, and streets. Fire EMS are protecting lives and property with a 3 to 4 minute response time, which is exceptional. Police, with the chief's community-based approach, keeps crime low, citizens safe, and engaged. Parks and Recreation offers healthy quality of life programs for all ages. Development Services keeps the city environment safe, orderly, and clean. And it all happens 24/7 around the clock. It never stops. Community Relations plans and executes all our wonderful seasonal events, such as Winterfest, and we're having the Springfest coming up. Now, let me turn directly to the budget. I'm in touch with the city auditor. The city's financial status is above average with no liquidity issues in an area of high growth, which will enable our financial situation to continue upward. He expects a clean audit opinion on February 13. Next slide, please. Going forward, more development, higher property values, more people and sales taxes, and a future reassessment will continue the upward trend in our revenues, but this is not yet here. Although our overall finances are strong, this year we do have a structural imbalance between general fund revenue and expenses, resulting in a budgetary gap. The gap is caused by a combination of factors. First, the loss of the 1.2 million contribution from the water sewer fund. But recall the benefit. The water sewer rates were lowered, and we saved millions in future capital expenses. However, it did create some cash flow issues. Second, high inflation. This has been a high inflation environment, which resulted in compounding cost growth that included COLAs that averaged 5.5% over the last 3 years, healthcare costs projected to grow 8% annually, other costs inflating at 3%. So just do the math there. You've got 16% cost increases year after year the last 3 years. Next slide. The city staff is its major asset and provides excellent service to the public. To attract and maintain the very best staff, the city has offered a compensation and benefits package similar to surrounding municipalities, annual cost of living adjustments, a merit pay plan that has averaged 3.5% annually in recent years, competitive market rate wages and salaries, which often need adjustment to maintain competitiveness with the region. We provide the best fire rescue, police, and public safety equipment. Good equipment supports our excellent response times, as I mentioned earlier. Increasing costs of this equipment makes outright purchase difficult, requiring the equipment to be financed with debt. For example, an ambulance costs $125,000 5 years ago, now it costs $400,000 today. Over time, these costs add up. The balanced budget plan presented today balances the budget FY 25-26 and places us on the path for structural balance and future surpluses going forward while continuing high levels of service responsiveness and effectiveness. What staff have done to close the gap? Carefully planned revenues, each revenue item forecasted individually, including growth in real estate values, population, new development. City Development Services team assisted with development projections for vacant lots, infill development, and new development to include in the ad valorem revenue estimates. So we're looking ahead to the development that's coming into the city. We eliminated all non-essential costs. All department budget requests reviewed by line item to every individual item. And non-essential costs were all eliminated to the hard work of the staff. 2 administrative positions were unfunded, saving $225,000, including the assistant city manager budget. No new positions added. Non-police vehicles on expiring leases will be purchased and continue to be used for several more years rather than leasing the new vehicles. Keeping a vehicle for another 4 years saves about $30,000 per vehicle. Good job on that, Mr. Flint and staff. No new debt is planned. This budget optimizes revenues and limits expenses to only essential or contractual obligations. Now, Southport has the following options available to provide the same high levels of service, balance the budget, and eliminate the gap. Lower department costs, reduce line item costs, one-on-one meetings with management and department heads to reduce individual line items to only essential must-have items, which was done. Slow the growth of wage increases. We are in the people business, with 67% of expenses from personnel costs. Unfortunately, this year we must slow the growth of wage increases as part of this imbalance. COLA and merit pay will be part of the solution. Next, use some portion of fund balance. $3.6 million of fund balance is available above the minimum balance required by the city's fund balance policy. However, we need to maintain adequate fund balance for capital projects and use this one time so next year recurring revenues and expenses match. Increase revenues. The only realistic near-term option for increasing recurring revenue is to increase the ad valorem tax rate. But this must have minimal impact on citizens, many of whom lived on fixed incomes. So, The city manager's recommendation. The FY26 budget eliminates the general fund gap with a shared sacrifice strategy that combines rationalization of compensation strategies with a slight tax increase and modest use of fund balance. One, I'm going to have to lower the COLA, cost of living adjustment, slightly, and suspend merit increases for this year while we review them. We will provide a 2% COLA, which is slightly lower than the current 2.9% CPI for the Southeast region. I have to pause merit increases for 1 year beginning July 1. Staff will conduct a comprehensive view of compensation practices and recommend competitive and sustainable strategies by October 31 ahead of the next year budget cycle. 2, reassign 1 cent from the capital to the general fund. The 25 budget assigned 1 cent of the 31 cent tax rate to capital. For this year, assign the entire 31 cents to the general fund. Adequate fund balance remains to continue capital projects. The $164,000 I don't think will impact the ability to do funding for capital projects significantly. A small increase to the ad valorem rate, a 1 cent rate, a 1 cent rate increase. A 1 cent increase equates to a $38 tax increase for the median home value. The long-term forecast indicates that if development of population trends continue, additional tax increases to support operating expenses may be unnecessary in future years. 4, use some fund balance, $698,000, which is 19% of the $3.6 million. 5, if additional revenue materializes, such as the $1 million requested by fire department from state legislature, use that revenue first to pay down fire debt in order to eliminate the use of fund balance and perhaps do a mid-year CPI adjustment up to the 2.9% CPI. So, more specifically, how do we close the gap? Here you can see the various options to reduce the gap at different tax rates. At the 1 cent tax increase, which I'm recommending, the unadjusted gap of $1.4 million can be reduced by $82,731 by lowering COLA to 2%. Suspend the merit pay for this year only, $330,772. Use the existing 1 cent capital tax for the general fund. That's $164,955. The 1 cent tax increase. Use of fund balance, $698,000. You can see the various tax options. By increasing the tax rate, which I don't recommend, we would reduce fund balance. By going to zero, the tax rate, to a zero tax rate, we would have to increase fund balance by 1 cent, $164,000. Now this is what I'm talking about, the shared strategy where staff, I'm asking staff, the fund balance, and some of the citizens to reduce the deficit, the gap. Next page, please. The good news is the general fund gap with a 1 cent tax increase and these shared cost reductions gets us in the clear this year. We have a balanced budget. Next year there is a slight deficit, $281,000, but then as development comes online, we start seeing surpluses that begin to build over time as more development comes into the tax base. You can see the upward trend. So it's tough this year, but the future is looking good as more development comes in. Next slide. Other actions considered, but I am not recommending these. We considered cost-saving strategies, but I'm not recommending these. If we froze the COLA, I don't recommend that. Combination of freezing merit pay and lower COLA, I believe is sufficient. The additional use of fund balance must be preserved as much as possible for all the capital work that we're doing right now with stormwater and road work. Higher tax increase, long-term forecast, that long-term forecast chart you just saw, the graph on the upward trend shows that further tax increases may not be needed for operating expenses. City services adjustment. Our city services are lean, efficient, and effective. You guys are the best. As I said at the outset, 3 to 4 minute response times, you're on it. Stormwater issues, you're there. Saving lives and property, you guys are on top of things. I do not recommend any adjustment to staffing at this time. Looking ahead on the long-term forecasting, we created this year, Mr. Flint did an excellent job along with Joey there, working on the long-term forecast model and all your contributions. We created a long-term financial model now that looks at general fund balances out over the next years. That was the basis for that chart and graph you saw with the surpluses as more development comes into the city. So that's helping us project long-term now. What the model does, excuse me, it estimates annual development and the tax revenue from development. So we're factoring in the development that is coming in. And as the auditor said at the outset, there's more population and more growth here. So the revenue generation on sales tax and such will continue upward. The model estimates annual development and tax revenue from development, projects the impact of property revaluation in 28 and 32, assumes an ad valorem tax rate for each year, which right now is recommended at 32 cents, estimates all other annual revenue sources, uses actual employee salary and benefit costs with right now no changes in the number of employees, applies variable inflation factors to wages, benefits, and other costs. The development is based on scheduled and projected development. The model does not assume an increase in staff, assume new debt payments at this time, assume future rate increases for state pension, because we don't know, but is a robust enough model to be able to adjust once we know that. Does not reduce employee benefits. Those are protected. It is important that in the future, the city's finances generates general fund surpluses for unanticipated future costs to be applied to the capital fund to maintain and improve city infrastructure and assets. The long-term forecast indicates this will occur over time. Long-term modeling enables the city to understand our choices made today impact future years. Next slide, please. Okay, last slide. Long-term strategies. The benefit of the long-term model is it allows us to look ahead at projected future costs. And I think we can minimize tax increases without fluctuation. That should be the strategy from year to year. The tax rate proposed achieves this and allows for budget surpluses to begin in 2 years to build up funds for capital projects. Projected surpluses should be dedicated to capital to build a strongly funded CIP, but as well as protecting the chief asset, as I said, the city staff, which do the work. The use of debt. Institute a debt policy that addresses the use of debt over the long term as part of capital budgeting. Compensation. Assess the optimal mix of wages, compensation, adjustment, and benefits to be competitive, to recruit, retain highly qualified and motivated staff that is financially sustainable. The model will help us do that. Use the long-term forecast model to understand these cost impacts. The new tool assists the immediate and long-term impacts well in advance of actual outlays and helps us manage these fluctuation and gaps and surpluses well in advance. Finally, capital funding needs to take priority with all our urgent stormwater needs and road needs, building needs, as we saw with PTC 8. Begin long-term planning to rank and prioritize capital projects for outside funds request at the state and federal level. Immediately after we adopt this budget, we will take the CIP, prioritize these projects, and begin outreach for grant matches aggressively. Existing staff can be redirected to pursue, write, and win grants. Thank you. Questions? There we go.
Anybody have any questions where we are now?
I would like to point out that the way you're balancing the budget is limiting COLA to 2%, which is less than the actual increase in cost of living, and suspending merit increases, and it adds up to 413,443, which closes the budget gap. So you're doing that. So you're doing that based on taking things away from the employees.
Yeah. Well, just to touch on merit, because I think this year that might be our bigger challenge. However, COLA is keeping them even. If we reduce COLA to 2%, they're making less this year than they made the year before.
It's just not
Whether-
fair to reduce COLA. We've got to match it to the cost of living.
So I agree with that. And I also think that we need to think about long-term, go ahead and make a 2 or 3 cent increase now so that we don't have to steal from our other, what's that? Our capital, yes, thank you. So that would be my recommendation, is let's find a way to not do that. Show the employees that we actually do care and support them. Merit, we have to get under control, because I think this board recognizes that merit across the board it's not merit, that's just a bonus. So we need a better handle of that and what that means moving forward.
Remember, the across-the-board part was intended to try to get people who actually were way below the line up to a standard. And so it looked like some people were getting big raises when, in fact, it was just getting them up to the basic line where they should be. And so I don't think we ever intended to go that far. I mean, just keep it going every year.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think that we're at a point where the study has shown we're competitive with most of our pay.
Let me see if I can say something here without sounding like a frog. I'm assuming when we're taking a look at COLA, we're taking a look at the CPIW for the Wilmington SMSA, which is 2.9 we're planning to put in there.
Correct.
We got to do what we can to make sure we get that for our employees. Now, merit's a whole different thing. That should be a pure bell curve. Not everybody gets a merit, but that's a different discussion. But COLA, we're trying to keep people even with what inflation is out there. And if we're at 2.9, which is, I guess we're back in the Wilmington SMSA now as opposed to Myrtle Beach. So if it's 2.9, you'd look at that.
Mark, do you have anything to add? Karen?
Certainly, I don't want to not fund our capital projects. But there's too many, and we've worked too hard to try, and there's too much momentum that I don't feel that would be productive. I agree with Robert. We need to look at a tax increase that manages that. I appreciate, and I don't know if I misunderstood, but, and I love having something that we can look out, but it basically, it said that assumes that staff levels are frozen, and it's dependent on development. So there's no way that our first responders and all of that can stay frozen throughout that process if we're depending on development, a lot of development. I think that that's what the county is experiencing right now, not that planning element. So, so for me, these are just some initial questions.
I agree with what Alderman Mosteller. I also think that for us to, the economy right now, I don't know about the long-term sustainability of the type of development that's happening right now. If you drive throughout the county, there's development after development. And so for us to think here in Southport that that's going to continue, I think might be slightly aggressive in our thinking. We've seen almost 5 years of rapid, insane growth from a value perspective, from a development perspective. How much longer is that sustainable?
And then I have a question, and perhaps this is a Lance question, perhaps it's a short question. The model is, it says it doesn't, it only includes the current staff positions that we have. Does it include the open positions that are there so that they're just sitting vacant okay, it does include those, thank you. And then as far as the COLA, I agree with Alderman Lay, and I think we should look at doing what the CPI is for our staff. I think the 5% where we have been was exactly as Alderman Davis said. It was intended to bring everybody up. We're now within those guidelines based on the study that we did. So I think that that puts us in a good position. I really, really, really don't want to raise taxes, and I would love for that to be on the record. But I think that I like the approach that the city manager has taken as far as asking the staff, asking the citizens, and fund balance to kind of all come together to balance this budget. That's it. Do you have any-
I think the 5% in the past has been the COLA.
It was.
Yeah, so
Which
it wasn't,
was
so
a-
if this year were 5, I'd be fighting for 5, simply because that means your employees are at the same number they were last year.
I think
If it's
5
any
was
num-
above. I don't think that was.
Well, then I hate I voted for that, if that's the case, because I'm pretty good about, at least COLA, because that keeps them even with the year before. If we're going to go on the record, I don't want to raise taxes, I don't want to steal from capital, I don't want to take away from the employees, I don't want to, rape the fund balance. So if we're going to go on the record with any of that, I'd like to make sure that that's on the record.
I also had a question about the automobiles, and this may be a Lance question, because the whole concept of the leasing and all of that was supposed to get us to a place where it was, that's why we were doing the leasing, because we were getting them at wholesale, and then at the end of the lease, selling them at retail. And so then to now just kind of switch gears on that, I guess I'm questioning sort of an analysis of how that leasing program works.
Is this on? Yeah. Yeah, so, would you like me to stand up here? Yeah. Okay. So, we only have leased vehicles in a couple places. The police, they're on their own plan. There's no proposal to take the police vehicles and buy them and continue to use them, but just because of the nature of how a police vehicle is used. The way the program works is we usually lease it for 5 years. We are developing equity in the vehicle over that 5 years. At the end of the 5 years, we trade that vehicle in. Whatever our equity is goes as a down payment toward the value. The problem is that the cars are just, the prices have gone up crazy since in the last 5 years since this program started. Public Works has done a really good job. They stepped up and volunteered to start buying out pickup trucks, which don't get the same sort of, the number of hours idling. They're not in office like the police cars are in office. they've said, they stepped up and said, we've got trucks out here with 25,000 miles on them, 30,000 miles on them. They're in good shape. Our garage maintains them well. Rather than us going out and signing up for another $800 a month lease payment, let's just spend the $3,000 or whatever it takes to buy the thing out at the end of the lease, and then we'll use it for a few more years and save the taxpayer some money. The other place is in the administration. There's 3 vehicles, 2 of which are development services, and 1 of which is, I guess, like the city managers. All of those are off of lease now. We can buy them out for about $3,100 a piece. Development Services has agreed that that those vehicles are fine to continue to use for a while, so rather than go out and buy another Explorer and pay another $700 a month for it, we're just going to buy out the ones that we have. We'll keep them for a number of years. It's going to save a couple $100,000 over the course of the life of these vehicles. So we bought them, we might as well use them rather than just trade them in for, just for that purpose. But police, different matter. Police will continue to get new vehicles as they come off a lease. We'll continue to outfit them and upfit them with all the necessary police equipment because those do serve a completely different purpose. So, is that what you need to know?
I think it would be helpful if we had that sort of in a narrative of
Sure.
why we're switching and that sort of thing,
Mhm.
just so to help us understand it.
Okay.
But thank you.
Sure. Would you like me to write to the board with the explanation? Is that what you're asking for? Okay.
Looking for a spreadsheet with numbers, or are you just looking for what
No,
we
I
just
think,
heard?
no, I think just why y'all are proposing this, and it's because it's going to be a shift in policy, really, of how we've been doing it.
Okay. All right,
Yeah.
will do. Thank you.
How many I guess I am asking for a spreadsheet because I'd like to know how many vehicles there are and which ones have leases expiring when.
We have all that. All of our vehicles that we lease are leased through Enterprise Leasing, and they do a very good job of providing us with all of that, the VIN number, the expiration date, the payments, and all that. So we can get that to you.
So would it be safe to say then that business model's not working because cost of automobiles, is that kind of?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's fair to say that the model's not working. The model works fine. I think it's a conscious decision as to whether, an administration vehicle, which is now 5 years old, which has been maintained by our city garage, which has 25,000 miles on it, does it make sense to trade it in for, $10,000 and then go out and lease something else for $800? It just doesn't make any business sense. And again, it makes perfect business sense with the police, but it doesn't make business sense for most of the rest of the city's vehicles. And again, I will say that Public Works stepped up to the plate and really early and said, hey, we should just start buying these out. It doesn't make any sense to try to go out and lease a pickup truck now is $60,000. It doesn't make any sense to throw out what we've got. So, all right, thanks.
Question for the city manager. Is there any thought to reducing the number of vehicles?
We've gone through the list and determined we haven't found any surplus, and any ones we did, we've turned in. We can review that list again, if you wish.
How many vehicles are we talking?
Fire.
If your question is how many vehicles are we buying out, 6 maybe, I think. 3 admin and I believe 3 in Public Works. So 6 vehicles. Public Works has a few more vehicles that are still on lease, haven't gotten to the end of term, and we're not proposing that we end the lease payments early because that just makes your buyout that much bigger. Police, I don't know, you've got 16, 18, something like that? Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Point out that the administrative vehicles do not include vehicles for the aldermen.
We can share.
I think I rode in one about 4 or 5 years ago.
to ride in one.
So we did have, I remember Miss Bonnie suggesting we take a vehicle that we had sitting in the parking lot and sell it. Did we do that, or someone's driving that now? Or it's not being driven?
That vehicle was what we call the admin car. That's one that's just generally used by City Hall employees for things like coming down here, or going to out-of-town meetings, that kind of thing. We did not end up turning that in. Bonnie had suggested that. When the new city manager got here, he preferred that we keep it for that purpose so that people weren't using their personal vehicles to the degree necessary. That is one of them that is at the end of its lease term. The buyout is $3,075 off the top of my head, which we've got teed up to happen on July 1 in the next budget year. That vehicle today costs us, I want to say, $550 a month or something to lease. So we're going to, for 6 months worth of lease buyout, then that vehicle is going to be good for years. So.
And also, I believe that vehicle is used for trips by aldermen. Yes, as well. So,
So,
yeah,
so that vehicle is actually rolling now, as opposed to sitting there with the tires dry rotting. Yeah, which is pretty much.
Lance, so the general fund surplus graph that you have takes into account the developments that we have on the books already. That, if I remember correctly, it does not take into account the empty lots that are just empty right now? It does? Okay. And then I remember a similar graph with diminishing returns at about the 10-year mark from one of the large developers when they made a presentation to us 3 years ago. They couldn't answer, and perhaps you can't answer either. After this 10-year mark, when it kind of drops off, we've seen sort of diminishing returns starting in fiscal year 2034, and then starts to drop 2035. Do those diminishing returns continue because we're no longer building out, so we have to prepare for that also?
So we haven't run the model past 10 years, but what you're suggesting is absolutely true. It will after 10 years. I mean, I'm certainly not any sort of authority on development, but I think all of us would agree that our future development, once we get past some of these big in-process things, begins to become diminished, and it's less and less of it going to be happening. So as you go out beyond that mark and your tax revenues, your tax base is not growing as quickly perhaps as your expenses are growing, just through inflation, you're going to see diminishing returns to that point. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you what's going to happen development-wise, but I will say, this is a model, and it's a good one, and I think we should be proud of it, but it's a model. It's
Very good model.
It's not a crystal.
This is great work.
Thank you. It's a model. It's not a crystal ball. So if any of the assumptions that are in there in the out years don't materialize in the same way they're in the model, it changes your future view. But it does what it does based on the knowledge that we have and the assumptions that we have today. We work through it with our development team, and it is. But you will, if you were to run this thing out 20 years, it will show that we would not be putting out surpluses, for sure.
Questions from the board?
Do we want to try to reach some consensus on a few of these items, like COLA and maybe a potential, so that the next time staff comes back to us, we see what those numbers actually mean?
I think that's,
Particularly on that one point.
well,
Yeah.
Lance, do you have the model available? Can we do that right now?
I have it available. What are you asking me to do?
We're looking at COLA rather than the 2%, was it CPI is 2.7, 2.9? Can we,
I can.
put the 2.9 in there and see what that does and where we need to go from there?
2.9 increases your use of fund balance by $72,000. That's right.
Wait out to how much of a tax increase?
That would be about a half a penny.
Or alternatively, add that back to the fund balance, 72,000. So,
Of course, that's today, February, and the fiscal year starting July the 1st, the world is changing pretty fast. So keep up, Robert, keep up. Anyway, I mean, we're just guessing that it's 2.9%.
Well,
I think those are the currently published numbers. It's
Right,
we're not guessing that that's what it is.
no, that,
But we also can't shoot fish in a barrel. We can't say every time it changes, this is what it's gonna be. We can set that as a future policy where we intend to adjust COLA to whatever the CPI is, but we can't go, CPI changed today, it's time to change it right now.
Well, at the point where we vote to adopt the budget, let's be sure that we are up to date as much as possible on what COLA would be and be prepared to make some small adjustments.
Lance, can you talk to us a little bit about the long-term effect of the fund balance to use to do what we're doing, to take from it?
okay, so fund balance, all the money comes from the same place, right? It all goes from, all the revenue sources, taxes, other revenue sources, goes to the same place. We have in our general fund balance a little over $11 million right now. We have a policy that says we need to maintain not less than 55% of 1 year's expenses in that fund balance. So the budget you have in front of you is in the, I think, $14 million range. So we have to reserve 55% of that $14+ million per policy and not touch it in the event that something happens that we really need that money, and if we go below that, there are LGC implications for the liquidity of the city. That leaves $3.6 million in today's, as they stand today, of available money that we can use. I will caution you that we are standing here on February the 6th with a lot of the fiscal year left to go, and that number could change. I mean, the fund balance is a living, breathing thing. It moves with revenues and with costs. But putting a pin in the $3.6 million today, that $3.6 million has to pay for any, I would call it operating deficiencies that we might have with our tax revenues don't cover our costs. It has to pay for any capital, anything we knew we add to the capital bucket. Our capital fund balance, which is separate, as you know, from the general fund balance, the capital fund balance is created when the board appropriates general fund money to the capital fund. That capital fund balance, as of today, has about $618,000 of unobligated dollars left in it that we can spend. What you're going to see in the next time we get together is that there are millions and millions of dollars of capital needs that need to be paid for one way or the other. So every time we use and consume this fragile fund balance and we consume it for today's needs, we are putting off tomorrow's needs. And as I said before, with this development in the model, it doesn't take much to turn next year's consumption of fund balance from $200,000 or $300,000 to $600,000. It doesn't take much variation in revenues and development assumptions. 10 houses don't come online that we've got planned for next year at $400 and whatever $1,000 a house times the tax rate. That's going to have an impact on how much fund balance you need to consume. So what we can do to reduce the consumption of fund balance today is going to pay off in the future. Again, if I had a crystal ball, I would say, I'd tell you exactly, but I think personally, it's probably necessary this year, but consuming $700,000 in fund balance, that's a pretty, taking 20% of your bank account and spending it right now, when you need a new roof and you need a new driveway and all those sort of things, it might not make sense. So I think it's incumbent on all of us to dig as deep as we can in this budget and take out anything that could be taken out, so that we don't put ourselves, what you don't want to do is come in 2 years from now, 3 years from now, and need a 10-cent tax increase, right? So. We've done it. Yeah.
Lance, we have a couple of big commitments coming up, and I haven't gone line by line through this budget yet. The waterfront stabilization money, we've got some matching money that we need to do for Yacht Basin. Is that all in here already? Where is that money?
That is not. That money is in the fund balance. So if you need $900,000 for dredging, the match on all that, that comes out of your 3.6 million. It comes either out of your 600,000 plus part of your 3.6. Any sort of match that needs. We're talking now about the capital budget, and the capital budget is going to need a contribution from the general fund. It's going to need a significant contribution, in all likelihood, from the general fund. The idea that we just continue to postpone capital projects, my personal opinion on this is the city's done that long enough, and we need to get started with it. In terms of the waterfront stabilization, we have a separate fund, completely unrelated to the general fund or the capital fund. That's the waterfront stabilization fund that has that state contribution in it from a few years ago of $5 million. We have that. Anything that we need to go above that $5 million will have to come from someplace. So.
Question for the city manager. If we were to delay the dredging project, would that imperil the grant that we already have for that? Our money is just our matching, not matching, but the part that we have to make up.
I can check on the timetable with that. I'm in discussion with the Army Corps of Engineers, but the discussion I'm pursuing with them now is how to get that contribution down. We're looking at alternative spoil sites to get that down, and Mr. Jarvis, when he does the CIP, can go into that, but I don't think there's an expiration date on that. Alderman Davis, I could check on that. Do you hear, Mr. Jarvis? Is there an expiration on the yacht basin dredging grant? Not that I'm aware of. Okay. So, but right now, my goal is to get that, what they're projecting at 700 to 900,000 down, and I think we've got some good ideas. Okay. Thank you.
The thing about the yacht basin dredging, we've been working on this since, was it the Hurricane Matthew in 2016, and we've done all the background for the past 2 years, and originally we had the survey done in 2023, and the survey for the silt and all of that, there's going to be a relevance of timeline for what we're dredging because it's just continuing to silt in. So I just want to, it's of the essence.
I wasn't suggesting necessarily that we put that off. I just want to make sure that we're looking at the bigger picture for things that we have already committed to that wouldn't be in our traditional budget,
And also, that's good information. These projects can't just linger on year after year. The yacht basin dredging is important. I'm trying to drive that as fast as I can as I develop relationships with the Army Corps. And Mr. Jarvis and I are working with our coastal consultants. So anyone thinking that the yacht basin dredging is being delayed, that's not true. We are pursuing that as hard as we can.
anything else from the board?
Well, to continue, well, not yet. Is there anything else can we talk about the 1 cent capital tax? And is that something that we want to move to the general fund, or are we willing to continue to fund our capital? Can we get,
I support funding capital.
What happens if we don't?
well, I mean, my proposal then would be to consider a 2 or 3, well, in addition to keeping that in capital, to increase taxes 2 to 3 cents.
I think the thing, the money is the money. We reduced sewer rates by doing that, and what we were already paying much of this through our sewer bills. That's what we have to understand. We used to fund a third of administration costs, staff costs, and other things through the water sewer fund. So that fund no longer is paying for those things. That's why it's back in the general fund. And we're going to have to do, the money's the money.
I would also say that, Lance mentioned cutting cost, removing the fat, the pork. I think staff said, Stuart, you've already told us you've done all of that. You and department heads have removed the fat. There's nothing to cut.
Absolutely. We went line item by line item with each department head, and we even looked at 2024 actuals, what was actually spent, and went through each one and just cut to only things that we have to do the service. Correct.
There are a few positions that have been open for a while now from the city staff. The funds that were set aside for those positions, have they been, where did that money go? Is it in general fund? Is it, that money's been sitting there, it was earmarked for something.
It just goes back in the general fund or stays in the general fund.
So if you're speaking of current, a vacancy that may have been budgeted for a full year that is filled in a partial year, you're underspending your budget, so it would remain in the general fund, so it's effectively part of the balance that we're talking about right now.
So it doesn't need to be moved anywhere it's in the big pot, so to speak.
That's right. Well, while I've got the microphone, could I say something that I have not been asked? Alderman Mosteller referred to the water sewer fund from last year and the amount of the general fund that was supported by the water fund. We have traditionally done the same thing with the electric fund. The budget you're looking at does not. It assumes $0 being paid by the electric fund from the general fund. That was something I put in there because, frankly, any support that we give to the electric fund, which is completely self-contained, is incidental. And if the electric enterprise were to not exist, we wouldn't save any. I wouldn't save anything in the finance department. So I charge a third of me to the electric fund. They've got needs of their own. So, but a difference between this year's budget and last year's budget is a few $100,000 that we were assuming the electric fund was going to pay for. As we've gone through this thinking this year, it doesn't seem like it's fair to burden the electric fund with that, with those costs. They're not there. So that is part of the difference that we're looking at here.
So Lance, the couple of things that we've discussed and may or may not have consensus on, the 2.9 in COLA, keeping 1 cent in capital, and increase in tax 2 to 3 cents. What are your thoughts with regards to that? That was a loaded question, sorry.
I'm not running for elections, so.
But also, those who are, I would like to go back to Alderman Mosteller's comments about the fact that everybody's been paying these costs, whether they were paying it in water sewer rates that were unusually high, or they were paying it in, or now they may have to pay it in taxes. That's how you have that conversation. So some people in some parties don't like the T word, and some people do. But, you know, that's what it comes down to. It's the same money, it's
Okay.
how it's being paid.
So I'm just looking at my model, and I apologize for sitting here and not standing up, but I'm looking at my model. If the portion of the general fund, if the portion of the tax rate that's applied to the general fund was 34 cents, okay, so let's call that a 3-cent tax increase over last year, and with another penny to the, back to the general fund, then your reliance on fund balance as it stands right now would be about $260,000, so a significant amount less. I will also point out, just for you guys and probably everybody's listening here, we did go back and went through the tax scrolls. Tax scrolls are hard things to work with, but we attempted to identify home values, built-out home values, throwing out businesses, that kind of thing. And based on the median home value, not the average, because there's some that on both ends that distort the average a little bit, but based on the median, a penny is worth about $38 on a tax bill. So 3 cents is worth, 120-ish dollars on a tax bill, 115. So as just as context.
What was your median number that you were using on that? The house value median that you came up with for the 1%, 3%, what was it?
Let me look at that. I've got that here in the model.
It's not a
Oh, it'll take me a second to find. $383,970.
For long-term, and I asked the question, I asked it wrongly, I think, but for long-term sustainability and, fiscal responsibility, is what we just talked about the best way forward?
So,
If you're
So-
asking me to answer that, I would say we have to grow revenue, period. We have to grow revenue because costs are going to grow. And we have very few levers to pull when increasing revenue, right? As we all know, that the way the dollars flow in the state of North Carolina, it depends on population. It depends on population, and Alderman Carroll referenced all of the development going on in the county. Well, the county pie might be getting a little bigger, but Southport's slice of that pie keeps getting smaller and smaller because our population can't possibly grow to the extent that the rest of the county's population can grow. So the sales tax pie will be bigger. Southport's already less than 2% slice of that pie is going to continue to shrink. How all that plays out, again, we had a crystal ball. But when everybody else is out here building all these houses, and Southport is going to run out of the ability to build all these houses at some point, or to build many houses in today's world and the way it stands now, I say all that to say growing the pie is going to be challenging long-term. The revenue is going to have to grow. So, the only true lever that we have available to us as it stands today is the ad valorem tax rate. That's unfortunately the fact.
Question. I'm looking at, I lie. House value median on average in Southport, 389,000. I am gathering that that's based on the last tax revaluation.
Right, that's the tax bills that went out for July of this past, 2024.
Okay. Realtors on the board, how many houses have you seen sell for 389,000 or less?
Well, tax assessed value has nothing to do with
So-
what a home is worth.
And you
So-
also have to include the condos at the River Hotel who have $250,000 for us, 400 square foot. So they'll pull it down a little bit. There is no, I think there's a listing on 11th Street for 375.
Some of the newer developments are in the 200 range as well. So we do have some developments that are coming in lower than that.
So,
Lance has done a very good explanation of what we're facing. And all my dear firefighters out here, I want you to understand you're the last of the city fire departments. And you see how we're struggling for money. But you hear who's getting all the money. Ultimately, who's going to be able to afford to pay your bills? That's what we're worried. That's what we're trying to balance out, to keep what we've got. So that's why we're holding on to we're trying to cut those merit raises and keep them balanced so we can keep our fire department. We really can't afford to take care of the district that they've got, though. We can't afford it. So this is the future, is the truth. I told our senator that I didn't think that we would be a city in 20 years, a state senator, that we would be a city in 20 years. And he shrugged me off. But I think it was the most prolific thing I've said to him is we might not even be a city in 20 years if we can't control these costs.
So, great point. And with regards to merit, I think employees deserve merit pay. People who do an exceptional job deserve that. So, I don't even like taking it out of this year's budget, but I know that, one, we fiscally need to. Two, our merit program sounds like it's screwed up. Sounds like it needs to be reworked. It needs some massaging to make it everything that it should be. Next year, I won't be here fighting for merit or for COLA or anything like that, but we need to prepare this year so that we don't have to strip it all away next year. So I think looking at this multi-year approach is helping to really make a better budget for the city moving forward. So smaller increases, I think, building in a policy where you're doing regular tax increases of maybe half a penny after we get to a point where we're comfortable, a 2 or 3 cent increase this year and then maybe half a penny over the next few years. I think that's how you create a long-term, fiscally responsible budget for the employees, for our constituents.
We talked last year about I think it was a $1.2 million amount that we had set aside that we used a third of last year, and the plan, as we discussed it, was to use a third of it in the following 2 years as well in order to reduce the amount that we would have to raise taxes. Is that money somewhere in this also?
I don't think we did that. I think nobody wanted to raise taxes last year either.
But we did raise taxes. Please, Lance, tell us what we did.
Well, there was a lot of conversation on it last year. What I need everybody just to think about for a second, we sort of need to stop thinking about the $1.2 million that was transferred. It's in the general fund. It's just all mixed together. It's wherever it came from, it's there. So we've got the $3.6 million there, some of which was the water transfer last year, some of which is not. What happened last year, as I recall, there was a discussion, there was a decision to use, there was a suggestion that we take the $1.2 million and we layer it in $200,000 a year over 6 years. But we circled back around and took more out of this regular general fund, so we took, I don't know, 500,000 maybe, I think, out of the general fund for the year that we're in right now in last year's budget. So whether you mix it, that some of it came from the water fund or some of it came from non-water fund, it's all in the general fund now. It's just one pot of money, and that's what we have.
I just think that it's important that the citizens see that we were actually forward-thinking and trying to diminish the need for tax increases going forward.
Are we just talking about general fund today and not electric fund?
We will need to discuss topics for the next meeting. What I'm proposing is CIP and the electric fund. Just
But even with that logic, if we had started with 200,000 last year that we were contributing, instead we did 500,000. When you start looking at this year it's 700,000. So it's not the 2 that we had originally talked about. It's not the 5. It's now 7. So at what point do we raise taxes? Because next year it'll be 9 or 10 or 11. So, I mean, we can keep doing that, postpone the tax, and just keep, again, taking from this and run out. So even last year, if we had just done 2, this year it sounds like it would have been 4. So it's not sustainable, and it's not, we can't even keep the current services to our employees this year because we didn't do the right thing last year.
Mine, our revenue streams are very, very limited, non-existent. We've got certain things we've got to take care of. Now, whether we like it or not, somewhere down the road, we're going to have some sort of a tax increase. I don't want it. Nobody else does. But where are we going to get the money? We've got to take care of our people. We've got to take care of the city. And last time I checked, nothing's getting cheaper.
Lance, as a side note, and I know this board doesn't necessarily want to discuss it, but with regards to our stipends, are we getting COLA on those?
No, sir.
Currently, just if you would, just so that I know, every alderman, what do we cost the city? It's $1,000 plus. Individuals. I'm trying to individually. What do we cost the city?
You cost the city $1,000 per month, plus 7.65% for FICA tax, and about less than $5 for the little bit of benefits that you get for, I think it's life insurance or something like that. So it's about $1,080 a month per.
Life insurance?
They 10,000 to get rid of us. So I was trying to find a way to again go back to what I was saying, that Lance hit a nerve that I can't let go of. In 10 to 20 years, when we're built out, the revenue stream that Mr. Lay spoke about will go away. And the only thing we can feed off of is taxes, property taxes. We have no way to make revenue. We're not, the only enterprise fund we have is the electricity, and somewhere along the line, we're not even using that money anymore. So we're not even using the one source of money that we do make money on is the electric. So in 10 to 20 years, all the fund will go away. Once everything is developed, there will be no looking forward. It'll just be what we have, and the taxpayers will pay the bill if we don't change the way we live and act. And we got to do it now so we can handle it 10 to 20 years from now. is the crazy reality, and it's because we're landlocked.
And I would add to that, Mark, that we cannot pump the brakes on capital projects because that just feeds into exactly what you just talked about down the road. And for me, my reoccurring costs, and I'm going to use Lance's a quote from his last email, a slippery slope. When we use general fund balance for reoccurring costs, we know that that is an axiom that we're really supposed to follow, because that 3 whatever million that we have in our general fund is for these capital projects that we're desperate for and have been planning for. So that's, for me, we've got to figure out a solution that we're not falling down that slippery slope.
I would like to see us, and this is just my opinion, go back and look at getting a prepared food tax on the ballot to see if our citizens would be interested in doing that. It's an opt-in rather than a broad-based tax. If you go out to eat, you would pay that, not if you choose to stay home and eat. Not on any grocery stores, not on anything that is not prepared food. I think that that is an opportunity for us to help shift what the citizens of Southport are paying to not only the visitors, but also those that live just outside of our city limits and come to eat in Southport, because Southport is Brunswick County's downtown.
We have to get the approval of the legislature to do that, and they've said no. What are we going to do?
Which is why I would love for it to be a referendum on the ballot. And if the citizens of Southport support it, then we are in a much stronger position to go to the legislature. And unless we have that referendum, we are chasing our tails because we don't know that we have our citizens' support for it. Once we can show the legislature, not only do we think that this shifts costs from our citizens to the larger public, we have the proof behind it to show that. Then we can go to the legislature with those numbers and have the opportunity to have a real conversation rather than just be shut down.
Believe that we have to have the approval of the legislature to have that referendum. I don't think we can just do it. They have to let us do it.
Well, Mr. Miller has said that he would allow us to pursue it, if I'm not mistaken. He gave us that go-ahead, except that he wouldn't do anything without that. He told us that.
Have some way.
He would only do anything if we had the referendum. So not that he's promising to do it, but he's not doing anything without the referendum.
A while back, tell us that we had to get the okay from the, Noah's nodding his head.
That is correct.
Okay.
We have no authority to hold any elections other than municipal elections through the Board of Elections. So in order for us to even present that to the voters, the legislature has to pass a local bill authorizing us to do that. And depending on the outcome of that election, if it passes or not, is then the vehicle to enact that new tax.
I think we need to move forward on figuring out how to ask the legislature for us to put a referendum.
I think the board should pass a resolution basically saying that, asking the legislature to do it. So, I will.
Noah?
We've got to do something. This would be a good way for us to get all the tourists that come in here and wear out our roads and whatnot to pay for some of the things that we need to have done. A town of 4,000 people can't afford all the things that we have here. We got a lot of people coming in, a lot of tourists. Let's get some money out of them.
Yes, I agree. And I appreciate your forward-thinking approach to that concept. Doesn't fix this year, so we're going to have to make some
It does not, however.
some decisions. But well, and I appreciate that. It makes me feel real good to know that our elected officials are thinking into the future.
I think we probably are all in consensus with that conversation, possibly to have Noah, maybe he could have it ready on the next agenda.
I reluctantly, I'll go along with you. I lived in Williamsburg. I paid $10 for a Happy Meal. It's okay. And the people who live here will pay that cost. The people who visit will pay a little bit. The people who live here will pay it every time they go out.
It's only a penny on the dollar is what it is. I think that the legislature allows a max of that, I think.
I mean, think about all that money that would come into the
That
city
would
with
just be an extra 20 cents on a $20 bill.
Does that come straight to us, or is it another situation like sales tax? Because if it's another situation like sales tax, screw that. I mean, all we're doing is raising taxes to support St. James. I mean, other communities.
All right, and any further discussion today? I think we have for the next,
Yes, this was great.
the budget process for next steps.
Just a comment. Listen to the conversation. I hear about, well, the long-term, the limited supply and development will diminish. But please keep in mind that limited supply tends to drive up the value of property. The last reassessments have gone up really significantly. There's going to be a huge internal market incentive for these values to continue increasing, particularly as the demographic trend of the baby boomers plays out. So there's going to be a natural market and tendency for the values to go up in properties. What was the last? Well, there was one that was a 41% increase.
Well, yeah. So what I would say is that one of the things, Stuart, that the county is I think cautious of is what took place in 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And in 2005 or 6, there were situations where homes went from $150,000 of assessed value to $600,000 of assessed value. That's not going to. I don't think the county wants that to happen again, because what it did for them later is when the market tanked, they did the exact opposite. So a $250,000 lot on Oak Island that had a $300,000 assessment was only worth $24,000 at the time, and they had to readjust downward. So I think the county's looking to try to make, smaller, reasonable, incremental changes to that. So I don't think every 4 years we're going to see these 40 or 60% tax increases. I don't think that's, and yes, again, I went back to the idea that tax assessment has nothing to do with the value of your home. So while most of us don't see a $380,000 house out there, that's its tax assessed value. That same house is probably actually selling in the retail market for somewhere between $500,000 and $600,000, but it only has an assessment of $380,000. So that's something we have to really be cautious of. It's not market value. So.
Okay. All right. So my recommendation for the next meeting is CIP and the discussion of the electric fund, unless you wanted to continue this discussion. Is that good?
I agree with that.
Okay.
That sounds good, and then if that's it for the budget, we've got a little bit of time we've got to wait before we can get to closed session.
What you want to talk about? Lance, what do you?
Adjourn and come back?
No. Okay, yeah, maybe. I lost it.
For us to sit here and look at each other if we're done, what we need to do.
Well, did he say he had to be here? Because he said as long as, he said we could do it. He said we could do it. Yeah, see.
Recess to a certain time.
Well, it would be more convenient for me if we didn't. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying let's work around things. I've lost it again.
Let's go ahead and recess for 10 minutes, come back at 10:30. Stuart and Noah. All right, I'll accept a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, we're going into closed session. take a motion to come out of closed session?
Move.
Oh,
Hold on. Hold on.
motion to come out of closed session? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we're out of closed session.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right,